The Play Absolutely podcast with Dr. Sue Jennings and Dr. Andy Hickson. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Play Absolutely podcast. Hello, Sue. How are you doing today?
Hi, Andy. Oh, up and down with the world situation as ever, but that will always be.
Up and down with the world situation. And yes, it's changing day by day, week by week. So, anything we say in today's podcast, because we record slightly in advance, could be out of date by the time it's aired.
I mean,
We're
this is
not
the
going
scary thing,
to.
isn't it? Thinking about now we have instant news, which reminds me of a very powerful memory when I was in my early teens, when at the secondary school the headmistress called all the classes for everyone to come into the great hall. And when we were all there, all the pupils, all the teachers, she announced that the king had died.
Oh.
And of course, interestingly now, it would pop up on our phone. We'd all know about it instantly. And,
We would. Well, I can trump you on that. Is if you remember back when we were living in the jungle with the Temyar back in the 70s. Of course, we weren't getting news until somebody wrote a letter to a PO box in Kuala Lumpur, and on the very occasional visits outside of the jungle that we made, every few months, we would sort of get news that was 2, 3, 4, 5 months old. Yeah, that was the latest news then. So
yes,
yeah, now
it didn't matter.
no,
That was the important thing. Whereas now people are alert to their iPads and iPhones and smartphones all the time.
indeed. So let's try and take our viewers, at least temporarily, away from the worries and concerns in the world, without diminishing them. But let's just take a little break for them, and we're going to talk about all things play today in today's episode. Have you been getting up to anything playful this week?
Well, I've been preparing for a conference, a chapter, and a forward to a book. So I've been quite busy and always trying to keep the whole idea of writing playful, because once my writing stops being playful, it gets dirge-like and boring, and I bore myself. So now and again I have to remember to have flowers on my desk or a toy that I can play with and so on. Very unfortunately, I got some new toys in a sale, and the putty, which you're supposed to really mould and stretch, has got something in it that made my hands itch. So I couldn't play with it, which was very sad, because I was looking forward to this new type of texture to pull it about and so on. And right up to my wrists I was itching. What it's got in it I'm not sure yet. I'll have to find out.
I was going to say, have you got one of those fancy sort of playful pencils, or pens that, have a little feather on them or a little toy in the end? But I doubt you use that to write anymore. Do you use a keyboard, or are you one of these people that put pen to paper still?
I prefer to put pen to paper, but sometimes I'm driven by time to have to go directly on the keyboard. But my preferred choice is to handwrite first, because I often puzzle things out on paper.
Okay.
I have a little story of Miriam who goes to the supermarket, but I'm busy thinking, now, do I name the supermarket? How does a sentence sound if she goes to Tesco's or Sainsbury's and so
Mm.
on. So there's all sorts of crossing out and then getting the flow. Once I've got the flow, I can go onto the keyboard.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
everyone has their own individual way of writing.
Yes, they do. And I mean, my way is, I mean, whenever I'm in the office or at home, I tend to write on a keyboard. But I don't often travel with a laptop. So I like to, if I'm traveling on a train or an airplane or I'm out and about, I'll always have a notepad and pen and I do my writing like that. I also find whenever I'm rehearsing for a play as well, part of my remembering my lines when I'm in rehearsals is rather than writing out my lines on a keyboard, I write them out by hand. That
Mm.
helps me memorize them. And of course, I like doodling as well when I write. And if you haven't got a pen and paper to hand, it's very difficult to
Mm.
doodle. Yeah. So anyway, let's move away from doodling and get on to something a little bit more serious or playful. This week's play in the news.
Mm.
So, first, we have a story from the UK. And it's from a UK charity this time called Sense. Uh, they support people with disabilities, and they've just launched what they call Connect and Play. This is an early intervention service to help
Mm.
families engage in play with children who have complex disabilities, aiming to support communication, reduce isolation, and improve development opportunities. Now, why does this matter? Their press release says that it frames play as central to early physical, cognitive, and emotional development and to
Good, good,
children's
good.
learning, to help socialise and communicate with the service and intended to reach thousands of children. So, this is inclusion through play in
Mm.
the most practical sense, supporting
That's
families to
really,
find
really
ways.
important. Mm.
Yeah,
Yes, we must
supporting.
write them up in our newsletter, perhaps, because to
Yeah.
people to know about that service, I think, is very important, and it stops this ghettoization of people with complex learning needs.
Mm.
Because sometimes I'm afraid that medics can be very critical that, or suggest, well, she's never going to reach her full potential, or you need to think whether or not you should put him in an institution. And they really paint very dismal scenarios.
Indeed. So, the end of the story. So, this is inclusion through play in the most practical sense,
Hmm.
supporting families to find ways of connecting and communicating so disabled children aren't locked out of early play
Hmm.
and development.
Hmm.
Now, our second story from abroad comes from the Russian newspaper Kommersant with the headline Medical Clowning as Therapeutic Play in Hospitals. In Moscow and other hospitals in Russia, an NGO is funding and scaling regular medical clown visits to hospitals, including launching a training school for medical clowns.
Hmm.
The core intervention
Fantastic.
is clowns using playful interaction to reduce fear and support children through treatment, framed as aiding recovery, rehabilitation, and reducing anxiety. In Russia, medical clowning is being treated as serious care. Play used to reduce anxiety and help children tolerate treatment. That's this week's Play in the News.
Hmm. Well, I think the whole question of medical clowns is very important. And
Hmm.
it's interesting it's not become very prominent in the UK, but it has in many other countries, often
Yeah.
in countries at war, for example,
Hmm.
but countries where one perhaps has observed rather more punitive attitudes towards children, that somehow the idea of the medical clown latches on. I'm not quite sure why it does in some countries and not
Right.
others.
Hmm. Because we've seen it in Gaza, of course,
Yes.
and as you say, yes, in war torn countries. The I don't know whether it's because clowning is relatively, I say relatively easy to do, because you can just use a single person. You don't need a whole group of people. You know, one person can be a clown. Get some clowning clothes and a bit of training, and yes, it brings a lot of fun. Although you do get some people that seem, for some reason, to be scared of clowns. I don't
Mm.
know where that come from. Is that through horror films that have scary clowns in them, or?
I'm not too sure, but certainly I think it's similar to some children being frightened of Father Christmas in the grotto
Okay.
and not going to talk to him.
Mm,
Of course,
okay.
now I think they've stopped Father Christmas having children sitting on his knee, haven't they? Seeming it could lead to inappropriate touch. So children normally just go up and tell him something. But I've
In the
known.
broader, in the
Go on.
broader, in the broader sort of scheme of things, I think that has developed into a bit of a tragedy, really, because you get a lot of children, and I think we might have touched on this in one of our earlier podcasts, that need support, need comfort due to a whole range of things, and teachers or various carers and so on, due to policies, school policies or government policies, aren't able to offer comfort support, aren't able to give children an innocent hug to help support them. And I think that is a tragedy.
I agree. Yes, we have mentioned it briefly before, but I think it's
Mm,
entirely relevant in relation to medical clowns.
right.
Because fortunately, a medical clown is able to work without touch if necessary,
Mm,
but nevertheless engages the child in some funny exchange or producing a
mm,
magic flower or whatever.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
know
clowning.
so in
Go on.
Japan they
Mm,
have a system in some hospitals whereby the equivalent of a play therapist has amongst her gear exact replicas of x-ray machines and surgeons
wow.
equipment and so on, and she will engage in playful sessions before a child, say, has an operation,
Mm,
using these actual replicas of the technical stuff, even down to the uniforms and badges and masks and so on.
mm-hmm.
And that's a sort of knowledge through play, isn't it? Getting to know something before it happens to you, like a rehearsal.
Right. So tell me, Sue, I mean, you've trained an awful lot of people over the years, not just through neurodramatic play, but through play therapy, drama therapy, creative drama, and so on,
Mm.
in various aspects of play and playful development. And I'm sure as part of that, you've had people engage in their own playful projects where they've had to sort of work with children or adults and so on and write up papers on that. Without divulging any names or places or people, have there been any kind of funny things that have been given to you where the student or the person engaging in a project has, I don't know, for want of a better phrase, got it totally wrong and, sort of done the opposite of a playful activity, or it's kind of, it's just exploded in their face kind of thing. Any funny stories you could share?
Well, one in particular immediately comes to mind is a playful drama project with infant age children. I think there'd just been a mountaineering success in the news or something, so we were going
Okay.
to climb our own mountain.
Hmm.
And we asked the children, if we're going to climb a mountain, what do we need to think about before we go? And, special clothes and maybe a stick or maybe two sticks. And somebody else said, and if you get high up a mountain, you can't breathe, can you? So another child said, no, no, but it's all right. If you take lots of tubes of tunes, you'll be able to breathe okay. The slogan at the time was tunes help you breathe more easily. So the
The
moment the other
advertiser's
child
dream.
had mentioned the breathing, tunes would be the solution. So we all had to pack tubes of tunes in our rucksack to climb the mountain. So that was an immediate thing, but luckily the staff were thinking on their feet and not dismissing it. Um, but one very interesting thing happened when I was in Kazakhstan running a project for
Okay.
the British Council there.
Hmm.
And there was a mixed group of international children. And we did a workshop very much alongside the techniques that the late Veronica Sherborne used to use, where you do pushing and pulling so you can have a struggle without hurting people.
Hmm.
And I've added all sorts of things to that system. And one is where one person crouches on the floor and the other person stands on their back.
Right.
And the thing is, the person underneath has to trust themselves that they can hold the person, but the person on top also has to trust the person underneath that they won't fall off.
Hmm.
So it's a very interesting trust exercise. And one boy from the Far East in the workshop disappeared and went to the principal and complained that I was making them do undignified things and it was disrespectful to stand on a girl's back.
Okay.
And it caused quite a furore
Hmm. Okay.
because how does one actually turn that into practice? Yes, we respect cultural norms, but there were many Far Eastern children there, and nobody else thought anything about it. And we do climb over people and do run around games and you crawl through people's legs and so on.
Hmm.
It's all part of sort of PE type stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Wow.
But I mean, I was summoned to see the principal to discuss it and told blah de blah.
Hmm.
And
One
so
of
I offered to give the whole group a talk about what we do and why we do it.
hmm.
And this particular boy didn't turn up, so it actually
Oh.
defeated the whole purpose, really.
Hmm. That's a shame.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, no, no. I was just about to tell you. I mean, I've had a whole variety of stories. I think where things have gone wrong, uh, and certainly in terms of play, one of the, I suppose, one time, and ultimately a lot of people were lucky, including myself. One of the things that I used to do with my company was we ran the anti-bullying village at the Glastonbury Festival. So we had part of a field, part of the Green Futures field, where we had a whole village, lots of activities, shows, workshops, games, and so on. And one of the things that I innovated, I developed on the back of one of Augusta Boal's techniques called blind car, was blind running. So I developed this game blind running about 30, 40 years ago, I suppose. And we took it to the Glastonbury Festival and created something that we called the Blind Olympics, which was, I think, our most popular activity. And essentially, what that is you've got two support workers from my company, Actionwork, and then volunteers would come up, put on a blindfold, and then run as fast as they can over a course with two support workers running alongside them. Now that sounds easy to do, but actually once you've got the blindfold on, running with a blindfold on is really difficult. You know, you can be in an open field on your own, close your eyes and start running, and after, 10 steps really, most people, if they haven't already, will be opening their eyes. You know, you have all kinds of imaginations that a tree or something has suddenly appeared in front of you. But anyway, this popular. We had hundreds and hundreds of people around us when we were doing this activity at the Glastonbury Festival. And one time, a few years ago, we were doing this activity, and this guy, full of confidence, blindfold on, and he was fast. And he ran, and our support workers couldn't keep up. And he went through the end and ran into another tent where they were doing other activities, and they had a big metal statue that they were kind of showcasing. Ran into that, fell over, knocked over lots of other support workers, and we were like, "Oh no, is he all right? Is he all right?" And it was a near tragedy. He did hurt himself, didn't sue us, thankfully. But that after that, we put in a lot more controls over our blind running. But I mean, it was such a fantastic activity, and it's such a thrill to be able to do that. But it's fraught with danger. So that was a lucky escape for us, I think.
Did he need to go to hospital?
No, he had a few cuts and bruises. I think the biggest issue at the end was this other group that were doing this kind of statue. It was actually a statue. They were doing a sort of telescope looking at the skies and so on. It damaged that. But everybody was fine with it. Everybody was chilled ultimately. But we learnt a lesson and added more stricter controls on the activity in the end. Blind running, fabulous. One of my claim to fame's the development of blind running.
Right. Well, perhaps we should incorporate it in the NDP training. How can you blind run on the internet?
I don't think that's possible myself. It's an in-person activity, but there's a whole we've as a company, we've developed a whole range of blind activities following on from the work that we did originally with Augusta Boal. So,
going back to the medical clowns in Russia, is it an outside NGO that's going into Russia with this idea?
No,
or is
it's
it
a Russian NGO.
A Russian NGO that set this up?
And again, I had to dig deep for that. There's no articles outside of Russia. I had to go to the source, so to speak.
To actually get hold of that. But I mean, what's so interesting, if they're using medical clowns and recommending it, it'd be interesting to find out, is there other play and play therapy going on in Russia?
Oh, let's make that a research topic and find that out.
Yes, something that we could find out, and maybe even Western play therapists might have been there discreetly and set up initiatives.
They might. Well, I mean, last time I was in Russia, I visited a primary school in Siberia, actually, being run by a Scottish teacher. And I mean, it was a typical, traditionally run primary school, much like you might find in a rural community in the UK. And I ran some workshops, some creative workshops with them. which they hadn't experienced any of this kind of playful activity
Mm.
in that setting, even though the teacher was from the UK. So yeah,
Mm.
how far advanced they are in terms of play therapy, and whether they've even heard of things like neurodramatic play is
Mhm.
something worth exploring. Mm.
Of course, that reminds me on our last trip to Malaysia.
Mm.
If you remember, people were telling us there was a school where there were Temiar children going, and when we went to visit, it turned out to be a Malay style school where the curriculum was Malay. Malay was
Yeah.
the only language spoken, and Malay stories were the only stories told.
In fact,
And
they
the
were banned,
Temiar,
weren't they, from telling Temiar
that's right. So when we
indigenous stories?
asked about them, the teachers looked very uncomfortable.
Mm.
And you could tell that the children weren't allowed to tell us when they said they just didn't know and shrugged. It was a way of getting out of a very difficult situation.
Indeed. Indeed. Okay, so there was a topic that you wanted to discuss in today's
Yes,
podcast.
I mean, I haven't finished my reading yet. It is just beginning. But
Mm.
the several articles I've been finding about how do people signal that they're being playful.
Right.
And the articles, quite a lot of animal studies. People like Jane Goodall and her studies of primates and so on, that young tigers, young baboons, and so on have a very accurate signaling system that the other animal knows that they're playing. And even if it's a bit of, fisticuffs and pinching and teasing, that it's not a real fight.
Right.
And I find that quite interesting in terms of communication. And I think sometimes observations of playful fighting is misinterpreted, and children are termed aggressive and getting out of control and must be
Taking it
excluded
too
because they
far.
were aggressive. I
Mm.
mean, maybe their playful fighting could be more boundaried, but often it is not fighting for real. So it takes us right back into this whole thing of let's pretend that how soon, that by 6 months, a child is beginning to be aware of the difference between something for real and something that's pretend.
So apart from a nudge and a wink, so to speak, what's your gut say are some of the signals of play?
I think a lot is to do with the eye contact.
Okay.
When you want to fight for real, you don't have eye contact, you avoid it because eye contact might actually stop you doing it. But
Mm.
when you're playing, you look at the person.
You might be smiling.
You may smile, and the smile would be a genuine smile,
Mm.
not a baring of the teeth and a false smile or a sort of.
Yes. Well, the
And
eye
it's a very.
contact, smiling with your eyes as well, they say, don't they?
That's right. But I mean, we don't get the clawing and the pinching in the same way, but we get the back slapping or the touching of the shoulder, or the high five, or sometimes it's the fist and so on. I mean, all those physical signals are to do with it being a pretend aggression, not an
Mm.
aggression for real. And of
Yes,
course, a
and
lot of sports like that too. If you think of
for
sword
sure.
fighting, foil
Mm.
fighting, saber fighting, I mean, they might be very, what's the word, persistent, but they can never be for real, or you'd get some dreadful accidents, wouldn't you?
For sure, yeah.
Mm. That's one
Okay,
of
well,
my happiest memories. Mm.
Oh, what? Fencing?
Fencing, yes.
Yeah.
And I had a retired cavalry officer who was my tutor at the fencing club,
Mm.
and he'd got incredibly bow legs. We used to joke that he'd tied his horse up outside. But he liked me because I wanted to learn sabre. Because in those days, women very rarely did. I mean, now women do all the different swords.
Mm.
But in my early days, we're talking 60 years ago, which is a long time, you were supposed to do foil. And
Mm.
it was more ladylike to do it, wasn't it? But he loved the fact that I wanted to do sabre, and he used to give me special individual tuition on sabre fighting, which I found much more interesting because it's not just the thrust; it's the cutting motion
Mm.
rather than the touch motion. And of course, have I mentioned on this podcast when I introduced fencing into a special school?
No,
And that was
that's.
quite something in those days. And the headmaster, when I asked him whether I could work with some of the teenage boys who were getting tall and broad and physical, and other teachers were getting scared of them, and I suggested to the headmaster that I could channel this energy into sword fighting.
Mm.
And he said, providing I took out my own insurance, he'd let me go ahead. So I wrote to the manufacturers, because in those days there was only one manufacturer, Leon Paul, that made fencing equipment. And I wrote one of these letters about tomorrow's citizens and sort of thing. And they sent back by return 4 masks, 4 jackets, 4 gloves, 4 swords, and wished us luck with the project. So it was the real fencing equipment, and the
Mm.
teenagers were just overawed by it. So I told them there was an absolute rule that if anybody messed around with a sword without wearing a mask, they were banned. And not just for a week, they were banned for good. They couldn't come.
Okay.
So to start with, we dismantled a sword and looked at the blood groove and how it was put together and so on, and popped in a little bit of history now and again about swords and
Mm.
so on. And I
Amazing.
just taught them very, very simple moves. I had no bother at all. They were absolutely eager to learn. But the very interesting spin off from it was a week after we'd started the project, I had a phone call from the local library. And they said, we've got some of your lads in here, and they've asked if they can look up Hungarian fencing manuals. And apparently they were saying to each other, we've got to try and beat Miss. And the fascinating thing was, none of the boys were literate.
Mm.
So they couldn't read anything, but they thought they might find some pictures and work out. But I just thought, wasn't that marvellous?
Fabulous.
Taking something like sword fighting and it spun off into teenagers that had never been in a library before and had no intention of going into a library, but they suddenly saw a reason to go.
And who knows that how many of them from that learnt
Mm,
how to read.
mm. So I was very pleased. I you know, took the risk and did do that project because it did work. Nobody got hurt. So I remember that program very fondly, put it that way.
Mm. Brilliant. Okay, well, let's segue that into closing today's podcast, this week's podcast.
Mm.
And who knows where people are right now, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that are very stressed. So let's see if we can just give them a little activity each to take away some of those blues, maybe reduce some anxiety and so on. What have you got for our viewers this week, Sue?
Well, This is derived from the several finger tapping techniques that some therapists use in therapy. But apparently, if you finger tap, say above your eyebrow or under your eye gently,
Hmm.
that in itself can reduce stress because you're actually tapping nerve endings. And it's something you can do sitting at your office desk, even.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not sort of too noticeable, like big breaths and so on. So
Mm.
I'm recommending finger tapping for people this week, using
Okay.
both hands, taking it in turns, and finger tapping on their wrist and over their eyebrows and under their eyes.
Cool. Good. Okay. Well, I'm borrowing from some mindfulness techniques, and I call this one 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. 2 minutes. And it's literally, if you just need to be taken away from those dreadful thoughts that you're thinking, is first of all 5 things. So 5 things that you can name that you can see, 4 things that you can name that you can feel, 3 things that you can name that you can hear, 2 things that you can name that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can name you can taste. And you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That 2 minute activity will take away those thoughts, the anxiety, at least for 2 minutes. So that's my suggestion
Great.
this week. Thank you for yours as well, Sue. Look forward to seeing you again next week. Please, can I
Hmm.
encourage the viewers, if you've liked today's episode, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel. That helps with the algorithm. And please leave a comment. What would you like us to talk about? How have you used play in your work or in your recreation? Do you want us to talk about something about play that we haven't talked about? Write a comment. We'd really appreciate that. And you'll get a mention on the next podcast. Okay? So don't forget to play.
Indeed. Keep playing. Bye now.
Indeed. Bye.